Across the Orion arm, her name was not spoken aloud. It was encoded, buried in threat reports, and whispered only in sealed war rooms. Entire species referred to her as the Widow of Stars. Others called her the End of Campaigns. To most of the galaxy, she was a living extinction event. Her true name, Valeth Kor, belonged to history books soaked in blood. She had dismantled empires with surgical precision. Not with fleets, not with orbital bombardment, but with presence. Valeth did not conquer through brute force. She walked into a system, removed its leaders one by one, turned its military inward, and left behind silence. She was tall, even by alien standards. Her species, the Karate, evolved on a high-gravity world, their bodies dense with muscle and reinforced bone. Her skin carried faint metallic striations, biological armor that shimmered under starlight. Her eyes, 4 of them arranged in a diamond, saw across spectrums humans needed machines to detect. And she had never knelt. Not before emperors. Not before war councils. Not before gods. So when the galactic broadcast flickered across every known network, showing Valeth Kor on her knees, entire civilizations froze. Not in chains. Not wounded. Not broken. Kneeling. Before a single human. Middle. The human variable. The human was unimpressive. At least, that was the consensus of the observing species. Elias Mercer stood barely over average height, dressed in a plain diplomatic uniform with no medals. No visible weapons. No augmented armor. His hands were clasped behind his back in a posture more suited to a lecture hall than the center of a galactic tribunal. He wasn't a general. He wasn't a king. He wasn't even particularly important on paper. Elias Mercer was a systems ethicist. When humanity joined the Galactic Compact, it surprised everyone by refusing military parity. While other species flaunted planet-cracking arsenals, humans invested in mediation algorithms, interspecies law, and something disturbingly vague called moral contingency frameworks. They were laughed at until Valeth Kor entered human-claimed space. Her fleet arrived without warning, 7 obsidian war spires that had ended wars faster than diplomacy ever could. The Compact expected humanity's swift annihilation. Instead, the humans did something unthinkable. They invited her to talk. Valeth accepted, not out of respect, but curiosity. She had killed diplomats before. Humans would be no different. The meeting was scheduled on Horizon Station, a neutral platform suspended over a dying blue star. No armies. No guards. Just 2 chairs and a transparent floor revealing stellar annihilation beneath. Valeth arrived armed in ways scanners couldn't detect. Elias arrived alone. "You know who I am," she said, her voice layered with subharmonics that triggered fear responses in most species. "I do," Elias replied calmly. "You end wars. I end resistance." "You end stories," he corrected. "Cultures. Possibilities." Her upper eyes narrowed. "Careful human. You speak as though that matters." "It does," he said. "To us." She laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Then your species will die idealists." "Maybe," Elias said. "But not today." The debate that shook the galaxy. What followed was not a negotiation. It was a conversation, one broadcast live, as per human insistence. Valeth spoke of inevitability, of survival of the strongest, of cycles of dominance written into the fabric of the universe. Elias did not argue with force. He argued with precedent. He showed her records, species she had crushed that might have cured diseases ravaging her own people. Alliances she had prevented that could have stabilized regions now plagued by endless conflict. Children never born because she had deemed their planets strategically inconvenient. You believe yourself necessary, Elias said gently. But necessity is often just violence with better marketing. Her claws flexed. You think I enjoy this? No, he said. I think you're tired. The word struck harder than any weapon. You don't know me. I know patterns, Elias replied. And I know what happens to beings who believe the galaxy only changes through their hand. Eventually, they realize they've become the only thing standing still. Valeth stood abruptly, towering over him. I could end you in a breath. I know, he said. But you won't. Why? Because if you were still the woman the galaxy fears, Elias said quietly, you'd have done it already. Silence fell. Across the galaxy, billions leaned closer to their screens. The choice no one expected. Valeth did not kill him. Instead, she asked a question no one had ever heard her ask. What would you have me do? Elias didn't answer immediately. He walked to the edge of the transparent floor, gazing down at the collapsing star below. Nothing, he said. For once. She stared. That's not an option. It's the only one you've never tried. He turned back to her. Stand down your fleets. Not forever. Just now. Let the galaxy see what happens when the deadliest woman alive chooses restraint. And if chaos follows, then we'll face it together, Elias said. You don't have to be alone in this anymore. For the first time in centuries, Valeth Kor hesitated. Her entire identity was built on action, on control, on being the final answer. And yet something in this fragile, unarmored human had disarmed her more completely than any weapon. Slowly, deliberately, she deactivated her external command link. Across space, her fleets powered down. The galaxy gasped. The kneeling. The tribunal reconvened hours later, emergency session, every major power present. Valeth entered the chamber, without escort. Elias walked beside her. At the center platform, before representatives of 1,000 species, Valeth stopped. Then deliberately she lowered herself. One knee, then the other. Gasps echoed. Some screamed. Others wept. She bowed her head, not to the tribunal, not to the compact, but to the figure standing beside her. I am responsible, Valeth declared, her voice steady, unbroken. For trillions of deaths. For futures erased. She lifted her gaze to Elias. And this human showed me something I had forgotten, she said. That power without reflection is just fear wearing a crown. Elias said nothing. He didn't stop her. He didn't command her. He simply bore witness. I kneel, Valeth continued, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. That strength can choose mercy. That the galaxy does not need a blade when it can have a hand. She rose. I will submit myself to judgment, she said. Not because I am forced, but because I choose accountability. The tribunal was stunned into silence. The deadliest woman in the galaxy had not been defeated. She had evolved. Ending. After the kneel. History struggled to name what followed. Some called it the pause, a century where wars declined, borders softened, and former enemies experimented with coexistence. Valeth Kor was not imprisoned. She became something far more dangerous. A witness. She traveled with Elias Mercer across contested systems, standing as living proof that even the most terrifying force could change course. When she spoke, generals listened, not out of fear, but because they knew the cost of ignoring her. As for Elias, he never claimed credit. When asked why she knelt, he always said the same thing. She didn't kneel before me, he'd say. She knelt before the idea that the galaxy could be better. And Valeth? Years later, Standing at the edge of a rebuilt world, she asked him quietly, "Do you regret not killing me when you had the chance?" Elias smiled faintly. "I never had that chance," he said. "You were already choosing to live." Above them, a new civilization took its first breath. And the galaxy, watching, waiting, learned that sometimes the most powerful moment in history is when the deadliest woman in existence chooses to kneel, not in weakness, but in hope. The galaxy did not change overnight. Despite the broadcast, despite the kneeling, despite the silence of Valeth Kor's fleets, old hatreds did not magically dissolve. Borders remained tense. Generals still slept beside weapons. Entire civilizations waited for the trick, for the moment the deadliest woman in history would rise and remind them why fear had once ruled everything. But that moment never came. Instead, Valeth did something far more unsettling.
She stayed.
She appeared in reconstruction zones where her name was still cursed. She stood unarmed, before survivors whose worlds had burned by her command. She listened while they screamed at her. She listened while they cried. She listened while some tried to kill her. And she never raised a hand. For the first time, the galaxy saw what accountability looked like when backed by undeniable power. Elias Mercer traveled with her, not as a handler or guard, but as a constant reminder of choice. When asked why he stayed beside her, he answered simply, "Because someone once stayed beside us when we were dangerous too." The compact formed a new role, one without precedent. Valeth was named the Silent Arbiter. She held no authority, no command, no vote. Yet when conflicts escalated toward extinction, her presence alone was enough to force hesitation. Not because she threatened violence, but because everyone remembered she had already mastered it and walked away. Years passed. Children were born who learned her story not as a warning, but as a lesson. That even the sharpest blade could be set down. That kneeling was not submission, but recognition. As for humanity, their reputation changed forever. They were no longer seen as weak. They were seen as the species that stopped the unstoppable without firing a shot. Elias never sought promotion. He declined every offer of power. Eventually, he returned to a quiet post teaching interspecies ethics to students who struggled to believe his stories were real. One evening, standing beneath an artificial sky, Valeth joined him. "Do they still fear me?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said honestly. "But it's different now."
How?
"They fear what you remind them of," he replied. "That no one is beyond choice." Valeth looked out at the stars, once her battlefield, now simply a home she had never allowed herself to imagine. "I spent my life believing the galaxy needed me to be its monster," she said. "And now I know," she said softly, "it needed me to stop." She lowered herself again, not before Elias, not before humanity, but before the countless lives still unfolding because she had chosen restraint. This time, no one gasped. They understood. And somewhere, far beyond borders and old fears, the galaxy took another step forward. Not led by conquest, not driven by terror, but guided by the moment when the deadliest woman alive knelt and changed everything.